Thank you very much, Matteo. Ladies and gentlemen, pleasure to be here and to welcome you to the press conference on the annual results of the European Investment Bank Group for 2019. Of course, for most of us, this is a very special day for us in the bank as well. We listened to the singing in the European Parliament last night. That was really impressive. We have not as big, but a similar ceremony, probably with the same tears and less expressions of joy than in the European Parliament tomorrow at the bank in Luxembourg. My colleagues on the podium have already been introduced, so we are going to do this together. And if you have special questions that should better be responded to by somebody who knows what he's talking about, or she, then I pass on to my colleagues in the Management Committee or the Directors Generals or the specialists of the bank. The results which I will outline today speak to the professionalism of EIB staff, whom I want to thank on this occasion for their hard work and dedication. And I know that many of them are going to be in front of their computers or TV sets in Luxembourg today, listening what I tell you about their work. These staff from still 28 EU member states of the Union left their passports at the door when they joined the bank. And these staff from all 28 countries of the Union have worked very hard to strengthen Europe's competitiveness and invest in Europe's future. The results which I will outline today reflect on their collective efforts to bring Europeans closer, to drive change for the better and to improve lives together. And I can tell you, 2019 has been a very good year. As a matter of fact, a surprisingly good year, because it started with a very big difficulty for us. Uncertainty about the impact of Brexit on our bank persisted until April or May. So we lost almost half a year at the beginning of the year. So at the end of the day, I must say it's almost a miracle that we concluded the business plan almost 100%. The EIB Group financed more than 72 billion euros of projects last year, an increase of 13% over the year before. I always insist on this formula. We invested into projects. We do not finance states or budgets, we finance projects. And you have to be aware that the cash contribution the member states, the owners of this bank, gave us over decades, in addition to the reserves that we were allowed to keep in the bank, and we made lots of reserves because we never made losses, significant at least ones. We rely completely on the capital markets. We finance our activities to the largest extent on the international capital markets by raising 60 to 90 billion euros per year in our funding exercises. And that works only if the investors from around the world have confidence in the quality of your projects. So that's the strength of the bank, that with the variety of professions represented in the staff of the bank, we can assure our investors that we will make the best out of their money. I'm very proud of this result since we started the year without the formal solution of Brexit. This forced us to reduce signatures for the first third of the year, or even the first half, and it did so considerably. In the spring of 2019, the governors of the EIB approved plans to fully replace the subscribed capital of the United Kingdom when Brexit takes place, which, as we know, is at midnight tomorrow, or to be precise, at 11 p.m. tomorrow. The bank's financial capacity to operate remains whole. Emotionally, we are greatly affected. The group's global result, it's 72.2 billion euros, shows the high demand for EIB financing across a broad range of sectors and countries. It shows how relevant the EU bank is for the hundreds of incredibly complex projects we finance around the world. Its depth across firms of different sizes, sectors, and policy areas is a testament to the unparalleled product offering of the EIB Group, from major infrastructure projects to supporting almost 400,000 SMEs across Europe and beyond. I think you will not find a broader and bigger database on SME financing than with us. The EIB Group enjoys unparalleled data on investment behavior of European firms and European SMEs that ensure our high impact financing. Last year, the group's total investment supported came up to 280 billion euros. On average, we are achieving more investment while providing less of the financing ourselves to individual operations. So the leverage factor is enormously big. Last year, every euro we spent unlocked 2.88 euros in the projects we financed, an increase of 10% against the previous year. Every euro we spend is working harder year by year. In 2019, we signed a record 1,095 deals, an increase of 28% on the year before. That means that we are able to find and reach out to smaller companies, companies which for a large part we have not worked before. That was the expectation raised vis-à-vis us for the last years, again and again. Go for smaller projects with more and also with new clients and give more attention on impact than on volume. That's exactly what we did, and that is reflected in these figures. We provided 25.5 billion for SMEs, 16.5 billion for environmental projects, 15.7 billion for infrastructure, and 14.4 billion for innovation. These are large numbers, but we measure our success by the impact they have on people's lives. Let me give you a few examples. Projects signed this past year will create more than 13,000 megawatts of electricity generation capacity, almost all of it from renewable sources. They will provide improved healthcare services to almost 12 million people in Europe. These projects will bring the construction of or upgrades of almost 30,000 kilometers of power lines. They will allow more than 630 million additional trips each year across various modes of public transport. And they will provide improved mobile network services to almost 117 million people in Europe. And by the way, as far as mobile communication is concerned, and mobile banking in particular, around the world. 2019 was a good year for the EIB Group, not because of the investment we made per se, but because of the difference this investment will make to the prosperity and quality of life of people in Europe and across the world. This year was also a year of new beginnings. We enjoy the cooperation with a new European Commission and a new composition of Parliament and Council. We have a new pan-European commitment to fight climate change, and we have a new partnership re-established between the Commission and the EIB Group to fight it together. We listened to the European Council and to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and last year the EIB Group announced a goal of generating 1 trillion euros of total investment for climate and environment between now and 2030. We now plan to dedicate 50% of our financing to climate action and environmental sustainability as of 2025. And we will do nothing that is not fully aligned with the Paris Agreement. The logic behind this being that, of course, it would not make very much sense to say we invest 50% of all we can do into climate projects, and with the other 50%, we destroy the positive impact of our climate action. So we must make sure that climate is in everything we do. Among the good news I can announce today, one is that last year our financing for climate action was already at 31% of the bank's finance. You should know when we contributed considerably to the efforts of the multilateral development banks in the support of the Paris Agenda 5 years ago, and we were the driving force behind the MDBs at that time, we committed to 25% of climate lending by now. So we have reached 31%, far above. The partnership with the European Commission has gotten off to an excellent start. We are proud of the fact that the EIB will be an engine to deliver the European Green Deal announced by the Commission. Last year, we also approved our new energy lending policy. This includes the commitment to end the consideration of conventional fossil fuels from the end of 2021. We are honoring the old contracts and projects, but we are not going to new ones. We are the first IFI to do so, and this is an excellent example of European leadership on the climate front. This strategic autonomy that we can offer the EU, this leadership that we can show in the world is only possible because our shareholders are the EU member states and nobody else. Other IFIs are finding it difficult to follow suit because of the wide range of shareholders with divergent interests to those of the European Union. Fighting climate change is the most defining challenge of our time. It is also the greatest investment opportunity of our time. Europe has been losing ground to our competitors on the innovation front for over 2 decades. And we will be successful with our climate policies only if we do it via innovation, research, technology, reaching new shores, not by going backwards. Climate offers as an opportunity to move in this direction. Climate offers as an opportunity to invest in Europe's competitiveness, to invest in new technologies, to invest in innovation that will secure not just our quality of life now, but competitiveness and quality of life for the next generations. 10 years ago, the world's largest public companies by market capitalization included a mining company, 3 oil and gas companies, 3 banks, and a bricks and mortar retailer. None of them are in the top 10 today. The only 2 that remain there are Microsoft and Apple. They have been joined by 5 other technology firms, Tencent, Alibaba, Amazon, Alphabet, and Facebook. So the change in the world's largest companies illustrates one side of the challenge. The greatest value to the economy, to our way of life, is brought today by technological innovation, through companies, old and new, doing things differently. This is a blueprint how to tackle the next huge challenge, the transformation into an economy that creates wealth without creating additional CO2 emissions. Climate action does not mean neglecting other areas of work. That's why I'm sometimes a little bit skeptical when I hear the word climate bank, because some people misunderstand it as climate bank only. No, of course, we are the climate bank because we develop and support innovation, SME activities, and by the way, cohesion activities in order to achieve the climate objectives. It certainly does not mean backsliding into closed mindsets. It does not mean doing less in these other areas like innovation, cohesion, or development finance. On the contrary, climate presents Europe with a business case and a pressing necessity to invest in these areas. We need to develop new green markets like we did with the first green bonds in 2007. We had been the pioneers in 2007 on green bonds, first issuance. People who did it, and I see some here, they were considered lunatics at that time. That market has grown to beyond $900 billion since, I think close to $1 trillion already now. And we will need innovative climate products across the EIB Group. Launched by the EIF, the European Investment Fund, I say our subsidiary, but the truth is, in view of the sometimes a little bit slow tanker of EIB, this is our speedboat. Consider, for instance, the first ever sustainability venture capital fund with incentive mechanisms linked to the achievement of specific environmental impact goals. That's great. Achieving our climate goals also means making sure we pay attention to the regions that have thus far been most dependent on fossil fuels for their jobs and economic activity. Just transition fund or just transition activities does not only mean ensuring energy supply, it also means ensuring jobs and growth in these areas. A just transition to a greener future will need to include investments in retraining and attracting new jobs to these areas. So climate action will not shift attention away from our core mission of cohesion, which is embedded in the Treaty of Rome and is remaining there since. On the contrary, climate action requires action on cohesion. We can all work together for a more climate-friendly future only if no one is left behind. And equally, just as climate action requires cohesion, cohesion requires climate action. Only by investing sustainably can regions succeed economically in this day and age. Climate action also means job creation. In 2019 to 20, for 2019 and 20, our investment report forecasts that green energy specifically will create around 500,000 jobs in Europe over the coming decades. In development finance, a lot of our investments have always been and will continue to be related to climate resilience and climate adaptation, making sure that infrastructure is resilient and we can adapt to more frequent adverse climate events caused by global warming. The causes of impact of climate change are global, so we must step up our investments globally. And we are investing in innovative projects across the world, recognizing that the development of those countries should be done in a sustainable manner. Fighting climate change is key to Europe's competitiveness and relevance on the global stage. So we are thrilled to embrace the Commission's announcement of a new beginning, a new focus on climate and an offer of partnership which we must continue in the future to strengthen the delivery of the EU's policy objectives around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, 2020 will be for EIB a year of strong partnerships and new beginnings. In 2020, the external lending mandate of the European Union, or from the European Commission to the EIB, is coming to an end. In 2020, the Cotonou Agreement signed between the EU and almost all the African, Pacific and Caribbean states will also come to an end. 2020 will be a year for completing the EIB's Economic Resilience Initiative to step up investments in the Western Balkans and the Southern Neighborhood, the huge initiative we undertook after the peak of the migration crisis 5 years ago. In 2020, we will hit the 500 billion euro headline target for EFSI investments, European Fund for Strategic Investments, part of the so-called Juncker Plan, thereby strengthening the legacy of the Juncker Commission and Jean-Claude Juncker's courageous decision to launch the investment plan for Europe. That, at that time, was not a given thing. And I must pay tribute to Jean-Claude Juncker for having taken the initiative and having gone into a risk. And I have to praise the European Parliament and the Council to have legislated accordingly, because they had to take money out of other pockets in order to be able to produce the guarantee facility that we call EFSI. The Juncker Plan has built on our decades-long partnership with the European Commission in developing financial instruments, and we look forward to continuing this partnership under InvestEU and NDICI, the Instrument for Activities Outside the European Union. In 2020, we will step up considerably our support for Africa. We aim to increase our investment in the continent by at least 25%. We know that Africa's future is key to Europe's future. By the end of this century, more than 4 billion people will be living in Africa, up from today's 1.3 billion. There are opportunities in making sure they are our partners. There are risks if we don't. In 2020, we aim to strengthen our presence on the ground, helping deliver EU policy objectives outside the European Union. We will continue to focus on high-impact investments like the off-grid solar energy solutions we signed in Mozambique and Mali last year. This involves basic solar home systems that allow you to turn on the light, charge a phone, play a radio, and more advanced systems that can even manage small fridges. In countries with electrification rates of 10, maybe 30%, these are a big deal. Not to mention the fact that the people using them won't have to burn kerosene or charcoal in their homes anymore and breathe in those fumes. This is just one example. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2019, we invested 8.8 billion euros outside the EU, over 12% of our investments. We opened new offices in Sarajevo and Bogota, and now have more than 50 offices around the world. We are ready to increase our outside activities and local presence on the ground in 2020. This will not change the fact that we are a very lean institution. That's one of the key advantages of the European Investment Bank. We produce investments, last year, as I said, 72 billion euros, with a staff of combined EIB and EIF 4,000 people. Compare that to figures of other IFIs, you will be surprised how lean this institution is. We have active operations in 43 fragile states, the least developed countries in the world. Around 5.5 billion euros has gone to more than 100 operations in these countries over the past 10 years. You can imagine the impact these sums are having on the ground, and we will expand our activities in these fragile economies. But as the mandates I outlined above come to an end this year, we need to make sure we put in place new ways of working outside the EU. At a time of reduced EU budget resources, you can count on the EU Bank to support investments and EU policy-driven growth. In return, we rely on a sound, prudent, multi-annual financial framework to support our activities. We are great at leveraging, but there must be something we can leverage. Ladies and gentlemen, the last decade started with the largest marine oil spill in human history from the Deepwater Horizon. We've all forgotten that almost. It ended with the absolutely devastating bushfires in Australia, reminding us of the damage that climate change and environmental catastrophe can cause. It was a decade of school children having to reprimand adults. It was a decade when we woke up to the climate emergency with the Paris Agreement. We are starting this decade with the EU embarking on a European Green Deal. So it's time now to roll up our sleeves and get down to work. We have set ourselves a huge task and ambitious objectives at the EU Group, the execution of which will require a lot of adjustments. And as we have shown in the past, we're up to the job. Thank you very much.